Speakers here. This guy is just back, a couple of weeks now, but back from the Polish border, doing volunteer work on this, in the ground, you know, working with the World Central Kitchen. And this is about Paolo, I gotta say it right, I gotta do it right, Volpati-kedra. Close enough. Anyway, give it up for Paolo, he's gonna share a story, it's gonna be amazing.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So I had the privilege to serve as a volunteer at the border with between Poland and Ukraine for 16 days. That was my mission. But I'm gonna back the story up a little bit. So to give you a context, I am half Italian, half Polish. Both of my grandparents were Polish. My mom is Polish. And my brother was born in Poland, and as a child I lived in Poland for a couple of years. And when the war started on the 24th, I had this feeling in me that started brewing. And a week later I sat down with my wife Giovanna and told her that I just couldn't control it anymore, and that I had to go. I had to be on the ground to help these people. Obviously driven by everything that we've all seen, but also driven by the fact that I have a deep affection to Poland, and there was a big opportunity with World Central Kitchen to help the refugees. And so we started planning the trip. So my intent today is to tell my story, but also to inspire many of you, hopefully all of you, to do what I did, because it's doable. It's not impossible. I'm not the hero. They're the heroes. So we started planning the trip and realized that I wasn't going into a war zone. I was going into Poland and then closer to the border. We're still in a safe environment. So I flew into Warsaw, rented a car, drove 4.5 hours, and settled in a little town called Przemyśl. 17 consonants in one vowel, as all Polish words. Literally a mile from the border, right? The process with World Central Kitchen was the easiest for me to follow, but also the most intuitive, because my wife pointed out that I've been in food for 20 years, and so why not and cook for these people? So that became a natural drive. The process to sign up with them, it's pretty easy. You just sign up as a volunteer. It becomes a little more complicated once you want to sign up for the shifts. But we were eventually able to do that too. So I left with a commitment of 10 days of service for them. The war started on the 24th. On the 27th, they were already building the commissary in Przemyśl. And by the time I arrived, which was 3 weeks later, the kitchen was fully set up. So it went from a warehouse to a fully set up kitchen with, they use huge paella pans to do the cooking. We had 20 ovens where we would cook meat or veggies. Gigantic walk-in where we would cool the products. And then an area with an army of volunteers like me to do all the prepping. So I call it the mission because it was really a mission. There was a lot of unknown, especially from a safety point of view. My wife, for the first week, thought that I was in war and fighting instead of chopping onions. Yeah. So a lot of unknown, and to me that was exciting. You know, that was gave me adrenaline, and show up at the first day at work, not knowing where you're going, the Polish directions and all that. But you come into this place, and there's this wonderful energy among all the volunteers, and we were in that particular location. We were all driven by the same. Instinct and by this and had the same purpose, but many people that I met when I was there through World Central Kitchen, through the hotel, through the restaurants, and I've been to, what you realize is that every single person felt what I felt, which was this uncontrollable need to be present on the ground and help. And then they all help in different ways. We don't all have to go there and cook. So there were people there translating, there were people there transporting, there were people there assisting psychologically these people. People selling local SIM cards and assisting the refugees in installing them. And I'll go on and on as I come to the second phase. So the first 6 days were spent in the kitchen and the commissary, prepping and cooking. It's a non-stop operation. We were averaging 15,000 meals a day. And by the time I left Poland, World Central Kitchen had served 2 million meals just in Poland. Right? 24/7 operation, fully dedicated people. It's a mix of employees of WCK and then volunteers like me. And to give you a little visual of where I was, so it's a large warehouse. There's a cooking area, there's a prepping area. Supplies are being received constantly, and they come from all over Europe. So one day we might receive a truckload of potatoes from Germany, another day a truckload of oranges from Spain. A lot of local procurement, of course, because the beauty of the organization that you just donated to is that yes, they go in to solve a crisis, but they also engage the local economy to assist them to solve the crisis. So we would collaborate with a bunch of restaurants in the area that would help WCK fulfill their goals in feeding people. So, and these restaurants are being paid by WCK, so it's a per portion engagement, and again, non-stop. And so the shifts are brutal. I'll be honest, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. And there's a lot of whipping. No, I'm kidding. The energy that is created within the group is such that the more you work, the more you want to work, and the happier you are because you're just doing good for these people. The environment is absolutely safe. We had a few incidents where people would come and steal food from us and then would sell it to the refugees. So WCK had to intensify a little bit security, but other than that, absolutely safe. And so the days would go by and I would be chopping onions or dicing peppers or a lot of cabbage. Breaking up meat, we would braise meat for 7 hours and then we would use it in goulash. WCK focuses on local recipes and recipes that these folks would appreciate and understand. So a lot of Polish and a lot of Ukrainian influence. Despite the volume of food that we would produce on a daily basis, the beauty of WCK is that it's all chef-driven. So, you know, Jose Andres is the inspiration behind all of this. And he came and visited us. But because he is the person that he is, and because the belief is that food is, it's an international language, okay? But it can be well spoken, or it can be badly spoken. And in his case, it needs to be very well spoken. So it's chef food that we're serving. So I never forget, I think that day we were cooking something like 10,000 pounds of lentil soup, and the chefs would be zesting oranges in the soup. So they give you that the chef touch. Before I would chop this meat, so it was beef shoulder, they would literally fall apart because I'd be cooking for 7 hours. I had to take the bay leaves out, because it's very important for them. We were producing an average of 5,000 sandwiches a day, so a machine basically, but in the morning we would be briefed on how the sandwich would have to be prepared. So it wasn't just a sandwich. They would call it the sandwich. Okay? And so it's a lot of mayo, and they would always be screaming, more mayo, and then a systematic layering of meat and cheese, and then more mayo on the other side, and then beautifully wrapped, and then wrapped in saran wrap. So wrapped in paper and in saran wrap. And obviously, you know, I had to do quality testing. So, and the sandwich it's an experience. It's not, you know, we're not serving prison food. We're serving elevated food. And so the whole purpose is not only to welcome these folks through food, but welcome them through beautiful food that they can appreciate it. And in fact, WCK is known for serving the best food. In many instances, it's the only outpost. And in Poland in particular, we had the central kitchen, and by the time I left, we had 12 feeding outposts along the border. So from the commissary, food would be constantly transported all day long, every day to these outposts. And so the first 6 days I spent in the commissary, and then I had an opportunity to be moved to a welcoming and feeding center. So the Polish government took over a mall and converted it into a welcoming center. So the refugees would cross the border by foot, be loaded on a bus, 10-minute ride, and they would come to us. So we were the first, let's say, civilized encounter that they would have, and the first food that they would be served. So the mall was pretty vast. All the shops were closed, of course. You would come into this large room, and there would be flags and names of countries on the walls, and that's where people would congregate, because that was the destination that they were going to reach after crossing the border, or hoped that they would reach. Poland and the EU is coordinating the relocation of refugees, and so it's often driven by family ties or friends or work ties. Or before I arrived, that mall had up to 20,000 people, and I did not see that, but it was described to me as as an unbelievable scene, because it was 20,000 people, and I counted maybe 6 stools for the bathroom, so you can only imagine. By the time I arrived, we were down to 2,000, and it was a lot more manageable. So they would come into the mall, and WCK had taken over. It's like it's mine. But this is what happens. You really become part of the family. So we took over a little cafeteria where we had a counter with hot plates on them. We would serve. They couldn't grab anything. They could grab the fruit and the sandwiches that we had in front. And that to me was really an amazing experience, more so than the first part, the first 6 days. So the 8 days that I spent into the center were extremely meaningful for me as a volunteer, okay, and as a volunteer for World Central Kitchen, because I was able to personally touch these people, but you are touched as well as a volunteer, and it's just a magical dynamic that happens. The majority would come in shell-shocked, stressed, tired, hungry, and it's all women and children, and particularly the children are very, very traumatized. They're just lost. You see, and so our mission was to welcome them. Me personally, I was the first smile that they would see. I made the mistake. I learned very quickly. I was telling my friends for the first 5 minutes of my first day, I would ask them, "How are you?" And that was not a very smart question. After 5 minutes of non-responses, I realized that it wasn't the right question to ask. I would just say welcome with a nice smile. I would describe what we were serving, and then I would serve them food. We had a magic weapon. It was hot chocolate. And so while people were eating, or as I would observe them finishing their meal, I would go to the table and serve them hot chocolate. And it was all about little things and little moments, okay? So it was all about distracting them from the trauma, the stress, the war, and allowing them to live these 5 minutes of a different set of mind, you know? And you could see, you could see really in their body the stress leaving them for those 5 minutes where they were eating food. The chocolate would gain me another 2 minutes of their mental freedom, because again, it would be, when you see them smile, you understand that you're doing the right thing. Right? And so the chocolate, and I'm a very curious person, and I had my own fundraiser, so I had decided with my wife that it was my duty to report back to my donors and tell them stories that they wouldn't hear otherwise. You know, stories from real life stories, not filtered or biased by the media, the TV. And so I was very curious, and if I saw that there was an opening, which could have been a smile, could have been a gesture, it could have been a word in English, then I would ask questions, you know, and my question was always, what's your story? You know, I have many of them. I will not go into them because I'm going to start crying. This the most crying I've done in years, but it wasn't necessarily because of sadness, but it was because, again, how you can touch people and how can they touch you back, and how intense that is, and having this ability of distracting them and giving them a little sliver of hope, a little sliver of happiness. And then the kids. So the kids, sometimes the kids are easy to distract, sometimes they're the hardest ones to distract because they're so into their stress and misery and unknown. And so I discovered another weapon, which was the squeezable juices, squeezable fruit juices. I don't have kids with my wife, so this was all new to me. And so what I did throughout my mission is 3 times or 4 times I went to a local supermarket and spent the equivalent of a Polish monthly salary on these juices. But the power of the juices was insignificant compared to the expense of the juices. And to lean down and tap a kid's shoulder and have her turn around and show the juice and see the reaction in their eyes was absolutely incredible. And it was that moment, and then when we do go back to the table and show their mom, and the mom would say thank you, and every single child, whether she was 6 months old or 18 years old, would say thank you. They're very, very, very polite. And then the other thing that I remember is that nobody, except me, nobody cried. They're very proud, but probably also very shocked by what happened. So I had a lot of problems sleeping when I was there, and I had problems sleeping for the past 10 days because of what I saw and because of the stories that I heard. But at the end of the day, they were able to escape war. Their future is unknown, but they were safe. They were going to families in another country, and their hope is to come back, obviously. A lot of them stay in Poland because Poland is very close to Ukraine, and so their hope is to be close to home when and if this ends. So as I'm back, I'm processing everything that happened, and I'm very happy. As I said, I recommend everybody to experience this. You don't have to go on a 16-day mission like I did. It could be a long weekend, but it's the power of giving, and it's the power of doing good. And it's a very grounding experience, a very human experience, very humbling. Once I started processing what happened and how much it meant to me, now with Giovanna, we're discussing the next mission, which should happen in a couple of weeks, still through World Central Kitchen. So if you go on their website, they have a general volunteer sign up, and then they have different opportunities that you can look into to volunteer. You're on your own in terms of transportation and hotel, but again, it makes it even more of a mission. But to tell you that, despite all the crying and despite everything that I saw and the sadness, the result is that I want to go back. I want to go back right away. And as I was leaving, I already wanted to go back. So I hope that you enjoyed my story, and I hope that some of you will get inspired to the point of going back. And do we want some? If everybody has questions or anything, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you. I traumatized all of you.
No, I have a question.
How many outposts are there along the Ukrainian border for WCK?
So right now there's 12, and for the adventurous individual, there's also opportunities now to go into Ukraine. So if you feel safe, they're not going to send you to an unsafe place. But so 12 at the border. But my next mission, I think, is going to be in Romania, just to help in a different way and in a different area. Yes.
So on the Polish border, are these camps where people are moving on, or some of them more like full-time residents? I'm just curious what the population.
So yeah, at the beginning, because they were so overwhelmed with refugees, they would tend to stay in the camps. Let's not call them camps, in the welcoming centers longer than expected. The goal is for a quick turnaround. So again, you minimize the trauma and the lingering, and you send them to their destinations. There's larger and smaller crossings. They're highly secured and guarded because unfortunately people find opportunity in tragedy, and there's a lot of human trafficking, especially because of how many kids are out there. So where I worked out of the mall, the first week a bus pulled up and 30 mothers and kids were loaded, and nobody knows where they went. They don't exist anymore. And so from that day on, the controls are very tedious. My car was checked every night when I left from my shift to make sure that I was not carrying any refugee. And there's hundreds of officers. And the same thing at the border. So they try to minimize the lingering and assign them to a final destination as quickly as possible. And as this goes on, the process is becoming more and more efficient.
Do you need any skills to make sure you're not just standing in the way of people?
So there is a clear divide between the chefs and the slaves, the volunteers. So you don't need, you need to know how to hold a knife, but other than that, you can be slow, nobody's gonna yell at you. So just endurance because of the shifts. So you're standing for 13 hours a day, there's no weekends or anything. So just little bit in shape and willingness to work. But I told you, once you're there, time just flies by, and you just want to do more and more and more and more, because you're prepping, you're cooking, you're packing, and then you see it going out the door, and you know that it's going to a feeding center. And so a recommendation, if you participate to a volunteer experience, would be to do part of your experience in the commissary and part of your experience in the front lines, because you see the beginning and the end of the process. And again, that moment where you're putting food in a refugee's hands and their reaction is absolutely, it's all about that. Good? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is a benefit for Ukraine at the wonderful Frank's. And there's Frank. And that's it from West Cornwall. Bye.